the cloud.
Welcome to Markers and Milestones. It's March 20th, 2023. This is where we explore educational opportunities for young men and women beyond traditional opportunities, all from a Christ-centered perspective. I'm Lee Bortons. This is my co-host, Amanda Kleist. And like I said, today is March 20th, 2023. We're joined by Eliot Grasso, an administrator and professor at Gutenberg College in Eugene, Oregon. Eliot, in case I did that wrong, introduce yourself to our audience and tell us about your family and what you currently do.
Hi, Lee. It's great to see you, and thanks so much, both of you, for having me on board today. It's a pleasure. I am the vice president of Gutenberg College, where I also serve as a tutor. Tutors at Gutenberg are a little bit outside the box in terms of we're generalists. We teach across the curriculum, so I teach everything from music classes to philosophy to history and to literature. I'm a homeschooling father of three. My kids are 12, 10, and 7, and I live here in Eugene with my wife, Kate.
So you're a busy person. You said a phrase I think a lot of people aren't familiar with. What do you mean you're tutors, not professors? Explain that difference, and teach across the curriculum. What did you mean by those two things?
Sure. In a traditional school, professors are seen as specialists. So they teach very deep new knowledge about one very particular sort of field. A tutor, by contrast, is more of a generalist. They teach broadly across a number of different fields so that they can help students make connections across various sorts of disciplines in order to build a big and broad, coherent picture of reality.
So when you say across the curriculum, do you have a very specific curriculum or is it a general curriculum? Tell us about what's offered there.
Sure. At Gutenberg College, we offer a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts. So all students take one set curriculum for all 4 years. So students take classes in sciences, in art, in exegesis, which is close reading of difficult texts. They take writing classes. They take junior and senior thesis as well. And all of these courses integrate into the entire 4-year program. So students come in as a cohort, they read the great books together with us tutors, and we all stay together for their 4 years as they learn how civilization has developed into its current state and hopefully how to navigate it as well.
So I invited you because I wanted our listeners and Amanda to get to know you. Gutenberg's an unusual college. We have you, you're one of our guests that we would have on for your program that I think is inherently tied to your philosophy. It makes Gutenberg College a little bit different. So you've alluded to a lot of the things I'd like to tell the audience about. So can you kind of just give in general, a child shows up, when, what age, for how long, what does their day look like? Just give us the lowdown of what it means to be a Gutenberg student.
Sure. So Gutenberg is distinctive in a number of different ways. I think the first way is that it's modeled off of Francis Schaeffer L'Abri style ministry. So in the late 1970s, students would come to live at Gutenberg College before it was Gutenberg College, and they would walk across the street to the University of Oregon, take their classes, and then these Christians would come back to Gutenberg College and want to talk about the ideas that they had encountered, which were true, which were not true, which sorts of ideas could be squared with biblical Christianity, and things like that. So over the years, Gutenberg College developed out of a call really to serve students in providing a very solid, exceptional, broad-based education, where all the big questions could be on the table as they were in this really critical age range from about age 18 to 25, where students are deciding what it is that they believe, why they believe it, what part of their faith they're going to take ownership of, and what it's going to mean to them. So students usually enter Gutenberg College between ages 17 and 24, 25. It's a 4-year program. Students take classes from about 8:30 to 3:30, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So they have Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. They have Thursday off if they want to work or rest or do homework and things like that. Of course, there's no classes on Saturday or Sunday. Students who live on campus, so Gutenberg is housed in a 100-year-old Jacobean-style house, former frat house near the University of Oregon. And students who live on campus do chores together throughout the week. They prepare meals together. It's kind of a holistic community experience that students get in the course of reading the great books and discussing the big ideas.
That's great. Could you back up then to the beginning? You said it's kind of like Labrie, and then I got confused by something. Initially, they were at Gutenberg, but they went across to Oregon. Take courses. Explain that a little better, those two ideas.
Sure. So Gutenberg College officially started in 1994.
Mhm.
Before that, it was something called Mackenzie Study Center, which was a
Uh,
Francis Schaeffer style live-in Christian community. So in Switzerland, in the mid 20th century, Schaeffer started up this program called L'Abri. L'Abri is a word that means shelter. And so young adults could come and live at the L'Abri ministry and talk with Schaeffer himself about the state of the world and all of the new ideas that were coming in, modernism and postmodernism, and understand those and how they related or fit or didn't fit with a biblical worldview. So we very much took on Schaeffer's model of building a live-in, working together biblical worldview community that is also centered around dealing with the classics and the big ideas and also the complexities of the modern world.
yeah, so
So
oh, go ahead, Amanda.
just wondering, are you still taking things across the street
How so?
at Oregon? Are you still going across the street, or is all of it in?
Well, that's another unusual thing about Gutenberg is that those who are students at Gutenberg, many of them live on campus at Gutenberg, but we also allow residents to live on campus who are not students. So, like, we might have a master's student in genetic engineering who's a Christian over at U of O also live in the house with our Gutenberg students and interact with them about various things that are coming up.
How many students are you looking at that can stay in that house?
We have a max capacity in our current building of about 23 students.
And are there more students that don't sleep there, that just come in for the day?
Yes, we do have some commuter students. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. Hey, so Amanda, any more logistical questions before we get into the philosophy of it all?
No, I just kind of wanted to clarify that a little bit. So no logistics right now. Want to
No.
hear the philosophy.
Yeah, so I got one more question though, because I know parents want to know this. Could you tell us kind of the process if somebody wants to apply to this? You got no majors but one. You have tutors. You have an unusual schedule. They're very much living, a life together in community. What's the cost and what's the process of getting there?
So tuition for Gutenberg College per year currently is $14,500 per academic year, and that's paid quarterly in installments in fall, winter, and spring, so you don't have to have the whole lump sum up front. Gutenberg offers generous financial aid packages to, I'd say, well over 90% of our students. And if students are interested in becoming Gutenberg students, then they would go on our website, gutenberg.edu, and look under the application tab on the website.
So is that 40,500 cover room and board or just tuition?
Room and board would be an extra $4,000 to $5,000 per year, and then Gutenberg has a fixed book fee per year, which is about $600.
So looking at 20,000 or less, probably including a couple trips home and some gas money.
Mm-hmm. That's about right.
Yeah, that's really, that should be affordable to somebody that really cares about that kind of an education. So you said you have a lot of scholarships. Who tends to be your donors?
We have private donors within the community, so we don't take any federal funds or things of that sort. So it's all provided by community members who love the students and love the school.
Great. Okay, Amanda, what questions do you have for him?
Well, so it sounds wonderful to live intentionally together in a study community. That sounds really beautiful. How do you guys, as Gutenberg College, relating intentionally in community, relate to the local church?
The local church, well, lots of students attend local churches, and we encourage church attendance. So we value the local church very much and appreciate the various ministries that people operate in the city of Eugene and Springfield.
Are you encouraging the students who maybe don't know how to, find a church? I mean, are you really trying to be intentional about getting in community churches, or are they more left on their own to make that decision?
They're more left on their own to decide how it is that they're going to pursue those sorts of things. So, I mean, if a student comes and says, like, look, I'm looking for a church of this or that sort, I mean, we'll do everything we can to connect students with churches. But we don't put a whole lot of pressure on students to make sure that they have a church that they go to or show us attendance or things of that sort. We really leave it up to them to become independent adults in that way.
Okay, so explain why.
Yeah.
We think that faith is between a human being who is independently and fully committed to God and God's purposes to take complete and total ownership of that project for themselves before God and to seek to live a life that is pleasing to Him in communion and in prayer with Him.
So how would you encourage a student to find a church community? Like, are all the professors regular attenders or?
We attend churches, so we might invite a student to attend a church if it sounded like they were looking. I believe we have a list of local churches that we know on our website that students can look at. Sometimes students will go down to the local mission and serve and things of that sort. It's all fairly organic, grassroots. It's not particularly infrastructural, but we do encourage church attendance very much.
You know, Eliot, one of the reasons I'm appreciating what you're saying is that these kids are going to get out of school. They're going to get out of being at any school, including yours. And then how do you become that adult that contributes in society? It's in the faith life, there's a lot of churchness involved in that and how you commit back. So I love hearing that you're making the resources available, but you're not dictating. Because it is something that as our students are growing in wisdom and knowledge, but also in relationship with the Lord, their understanding of them being a gift to the local church is going to also be growing. I'm also interested in this community of scholars conversation that you're having. So what does dinner look like? Give me an example of how would an insider experience dinner? I live in the house. And then how would a guest experience dinner?
I think an insider would experience dinner depending on how long they've been at the program. Students will have an understanding of the conversation around the big questions. Like, so let's take a senior, for example, someone who's in their fourth year at Gutenberg. They're going to have 3.5 years of asking the question, how do we know things? And they'll have 2,500 years of answers to draw on to have that discussion. They'll ask, um, how does man relate to God, and how is the church shaped man's perception of God in different sorts of ways in different sorts of eras. So they'll have a lot of answers and thoughts and ideas to draw on with respect to that sort of thing. So, I mean, with 3.5 years of being with the same people, an insider would have a lot of inside jokes to laugh at and funny things that came up during discussions, or strange things, or difficult questions, or personal things that would come up as well. I think an outsider would experience students who are real and both serious and also alive in terms of what it is that they are trying to do with their lives. It's a really difficult and challenging program, and the students take it on and take it very seriously. So I think they would observe a certain level of not serious, because I mean our students do. I mean, they have a lot of fun and enjoy each other very much, but maybe an intensity sort of thing. So like when we have grad students stay at Gutenberg, they'll say things like, this is the smartest group of students I ever met, and they're undergraduates and things like this. So I think you'd see a lot of fun and you see a lot of intensity as well.
What you just said was really interesting, that they have 2,500 years of ideas to pull from. To some people, that would sound like freedom, and to other people, it would sound like, well, now I don't even know what to do. So how do you kind of direct both those personalities?
That's a great question. So I think on one level, it's not 2,500 years of random ideas of people talking into a vacuum. You're interacting with a 2,500-year-old conversation. So it's like Homer says this, and then Virgil says that, and then Dante says this in response. And so it's very much a coherent discussion, very much a coherent conversation, though it takes place over a long period of time. So I mean, our great hope is that students will come to see the truth of the biblical worldview. And that is something that, I mean, we can't control it. We can't control what they believe. We can't enforce it or impress it or anything. Um, but within the context of the conversation, all of these authors are asking and answering questions that the Bible is asking and answering. And the question is, where will they go? Which answers will they find truly fulfilling? Which answers will they find to bring them to like a true state of human flourishing? So it might sound like, a 2,500 year free for all, and frankly, sometimes it is. I mean, especially when you look at some of the moderns. I mean, it's easy in one sense to understand why they're saying what they're saying, and it's difficult in another level to understand how one could live committed to the kinds of answers that some of them commit to.
Mm.
But I mean, part of our project is we really want the students to work hard to humanize all the authors in the conversation, and to really work hard to understand what it is they're saying and why they're saying it.
That's a big task. What and why?
Yeah, it's big. So a couple of more just easier questions, and then back to philosophy. Why Gutenberg? Why'd you name it? Why is it named that?
It's named after Johannes Gutenberg, who was the inventor of the movable type printing press. And from our perspective, what Gutenberg did was to take the great conversation and open it up so that your average person could participate in it. So books became proliferated in huge quantities, and more people could have access to these ideas and what was going on. I mean, the most important book that he ever printed was the Bible, of course, the first book. That's the most important book to us. And so we find some resonance on levels of those sorts.
So tell us, how do you use the Bible in your curriculum?
Well, it's an interesting question. Gutenberg does not teach any particular theology. So what we do is we help students gain the tools and skills necessary for what we see as responsible hermeneutics, responsible reading of the text. The Bible is a very old and complex book written across a great swath of time, and it's easy for us in the 21st century to walk up to it and simply populate its words with our categories. And so what we want the students to do instead of doing that is to do responsible exegesis by caring about authorial intent. So students will have, say, a micro class on the Gospel of John, where they will go very slow and very thoroughly through the first couple chapters of John. Students will have a hermeneutics class as seniors to basically interact with, what's a good philosophy of reading anything for authorial intent. So, I mean, in one sense, we want them to read every book with careful and thoughtful attention. The Bible just happens to be a particularly challenging book, which deserves extra care and attention because of that. All of us tutors hold a biblical worldview, which means that we think that what the Bible has to say about God and man and ultimate reality, we think that all those things that it says are true. And getting to exactly what it is saying sometimes can be a lot of work. And we want students to feel the weight of having to do that work for themselves.
So, man, I got a question for you. So, Gutenberg is one of those programs that CC recommends, and I've had a number of parents both appreciate it and join it, and other ones not be quite sure what to do with it. One of the reactions I've heard is that, I understand what L'Abri is about. I understand what Eliot's saying, but I've met parents nervous that if they went to Gutenberg, their child would really, truly not be encouraged in a Christian faith because they're trying to let them explore it for themselves, which is, of course, what Francis Schaeffer wanted to happen at L'Abri. What is your reaction to it? Or what are maybe some different questions a parent could ask Eliot?
That's a really great question, Lee. I mean, I really respect and appreciate that question as a parent myself. I mean, I think a parent has to, and a student has to be dialed into sort of where they are with their faith and their questions, and how well grounded and rooted in trusting God a person is. And so we all have to decide, like, am I ready to interact with X or Y question based on my existential commitment to Christianity? And so some students are really in a position to, ask the hard question. and deal with even more complicated answers. But not every student is in a position to do that. They're on a particular track that God has them on, and all that track is okay too. But I guess I would say, you know, it's really, it seems to me that the Bible teaches that ultimately it is up to God what happens to man, and I would encourage families to explore what that truly means, and to let control be his to be had over human existence and what it is that is our ultimate destiny.
So, Elliot, I appreciate that last statement the most. It's a recognition of who God is and who we are. I think a couple parent questions that I might throw into the frame would include the first question as a parent: am I ready for my kid to question things that make me fearful for them?
Sure.
And that's not a question about your child. That
Mm.
first question is a question to the parent's heart. You've especially invested hours of life and time and treasure into these children, whether you're in a homeschool model or a private classical Christian model, or you've spent a lot of time investing. And so, are you ready to answer that question? Do you see God as good to your kids? And the answer might be, my child won't flourish with a bunch of Christians that say we can question this about the Bible. They may flourish elsewhere better, and that is a joint decision. The other thing is, your 17-year-old may not be your person to answer the question with. It may be your 20-year-old who is better able to answer the question because they've got a little more life under them. So they read the big questions less about defining my foundation and more as descriptions of the people I've seen. So some of your program sounds to me like maybe the question for the parent is a when question, not a is it the first thing we do out the door, especially mixing with master's students. I love working with people who are older, who are deeper in their fields. They also tend to be really good at taking things apart because they're becoming experts in a particular field. And when you're creating generalists, as you are probably well aware, putting things back together is the harder challenge. So I think, how do you put things back together in your worldview is part of the conversation. And I would have them ask you that. How does your program put things back together? Or is it all just in the hands of the students? Which is also why I was interested in the church question, because that's where we put whole lives back together.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I guess I would respond to say that, um, even though 4 years really isn't a long time, a lot happens
Mhm.
in 4
Mhm.
years. Students change tremendously over the course of 4 years. And I mean, it's usually about halfway through the program where, I mean, all the cards of Western civilization are coming out on the table, and students have to make sense of it. I mean, we all have to do our own homework in that sense. So, I mean, I guess the question is, you're right. When does one decide to take it on? And will one take it on in a timeline such that, it can impact their life, thoroughly and holistically? So it's not like students walk out after 4 years with a totally perfect, coherent, finalized picture of all of reality. I mean, the 4 years starts a project that hopefully lasts the rest of their life, but it depends on the person, what they do with it.
Yeah. Every decade, we are actually asking those questions again. That's why those round birthdays are so big for us, is at least we culturally nod to the fact we ask life questions at round birthdays. So yes.
Good
So what
observation.
happens when you graduate? That's what some parents will be asking. Certainly learning for learning's sake is something to be celebrated, and a holistic worldview is something to be celebrated. But some parents can say, so they come to this school, will they get that thing that I think they need to pay for their family, or they need to buy a home with, or whatever? How do you answer that question for them?
Yeah, sure thing. That's a great question. So, I mean, there's not a low demand for intelligent, articulate people who have a solid sense of integrity and morality. There's a pretty big market for that. But in terms of job specific outcomes, students do lots of different things. Some go and start their own businesses as contractors or restaurateurs. Sometimes they go to law school or they go to get teaching degrees. One of my former students happens to be my chiropractor. So we go into fields like that. They go into robotics, agriculture, the arts, lots of different sorts of things. And so, yeah.
So one of the things I appreciate about Gutenberg, it's because I've gotten to do a number of things with you guys. You're the tutors that are running Gutenberg don't have the typical background someone in liberal arts or a parent who thinks they know what liberal arts is would expect. Can you tell us about your background and Chris's and some of the other tutors?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in music. I'm a musician. My PhD is in musicology, and my master's degree is in ethnomusicology. So I've studied music. I'm a performer. I play Irish traditional music on the uilleann pipes, tin whistle, fiddle, flute. I've performed internationally for the past 25 years or so, recorded and stuff like that. So very much in the arts and performing along those lines. Chris Swanson, who's our president, has a BA, master's, and PhD in physics. So he worked on low temperature helium as a researcher for many years, working on grants and things of that sort. Our dean, Charlie Dewberry, has a PhD in the philosophy of science, but has basically the Nobel Prize equivalent for stream restoration ecology, the Tice River Prize. So there's kind of a lot of like science, art people running around the place alongside the language people and the literature people.
So explain to a parent who doesn't understand the integration of classical education and just the approach you have to the great books, like how can somebody be a physicist and teach great books, right? To kind of define what you as adults are doing with these children, because it's been very important to me for all four of our sons when they went off to college, that they went to universities or colleges where we knew some of their professors. We kind of knew what was going to happen. Because we feel like as Christians, mentorship and discipleship is so important. So I love the fact that you guys are so well-rounded. So help a parent who doesn't get this whole liberal arts classical thing understand you all better.
Sure. Well, I think it comes with these kind of big, broad questions that sprawl across a lot of different fields. If you ask the question, what is a human being? Um, you want the kind of answer that is holistic and total and complete. You don't want just the biologist's answer or just the artist's answer or just the poet's answer. God has made human life to be one integrated, unitary thing called a person. And so there's going to be a lot of different thoughts and responses to those things, but what we want to build for people is a whole picture, because as beings who are primarily moral beings, we're supposed to care about the same morality in any context. So one of the things that specialization does, and it does lots of great things, but one of the challenges it has is that it fragments our morality, whereby where I'm in a certain context, my morality can shift like that, or I'm in this context and my morality can shift like that. And I think one of the things that makes general education so significant is that it demands a kind of uniformity to what a human being is, despite the differences in context that they encounter. So it doesn't matter if you're a physicist or a musician or a stream ecologist or a Greek linguist. You're supposed to care about the same sort of morality, God's morality, regardless of the context. And to be a generalist and care about integration is to care about being a whole, moral, God-made being in all contexts, regardless. So I would say fundamentally that's at the root of the holism.
Yeah, because Amanda, I think about, you and I have let our children go on. You have your youngest still at home, soon to leave. And they really are in such formative years. If they decide they want to be a brain surgeon or a accountant, they don't really need to decide at 18, do they?
Nope. They really, really don't. But what kind of human they're going to be, this moral question, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
So, good.
No, I was just going to say, there's it's interesting how much we let economics drive our educational philosophy. And I mean, I remember this, back in the 90s where there's a push to get specialization earlier and earlier and earlier, I mean, I think the logic is basically you specialize and you become indispensable to a company because you're the specialist who can do that one particular thing really well. And I mean, I guess the question I would ask is 18 the time to specialize um, on a number of fronts? So I
You know,
think that,
you're going
yeah,
to
go
have
ahead.
some children who that is the answer. Like they just really
Sure,
do know they're going to be a brain surgeon and they want to
sure.
get started. But it
Yeah,
isn't, I would say, normative at all. It's very exceptional when that child is that way.
absolutely, absolutely. So it's a question of us as a, I think as a broader church and as an educational ecological system to sort of figure out like, you know, what kinds of stakes are we putting on specialization and timing and all these sorts of questions. And I think that's an assumption worth investigating. I guess I would say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that an American answer might be different than some of our European counterparts' answer, even about when we say specialization is happening, when we look at some of the European systems in terms of when they start specializing in their schooling systems. Yeah, I think it is an interesting question of when. And to the point of there are some exceptional people who already know what they want to do, just like there's some exceptional people that fall in love at first sight. Okay. Those two things are equally possible and equally not normative. So it is really interesting to think about, this word is going to sound weird, dating the generalist idea and figuring out what it means to explore a lot of ideas with a rich Christ-centered worldview. So sounds fascinating. So do you give concerts at over dinner hour, or are they rarer?
Since my kids came along, I have tried to play away from home less and less. But yes, sometimes I go play for the Gutenbergers. We'll have our quarterly dance, and I'll get the dance
Oh,
band together, and we'll play for the students, and they'll dance, and it's a great time.
And so we've talked a lot about that, and this is intentional, the kind of questions parents want to ask because they're looking at launching a child. But it really is superficial, a lot of this. What Amanda and I think are really important is two different questions. How does Gutenberg help the child, or how does Gutenberg develop a child that helps the family flourish and the church flourish? How would you answer those two?
Well, I would say that the mentorship that students get from Gutenberg tutors is very, very significant. I think being able to build a long-term trusting relationship with an adult like a tutor is extremely helpful for a student. It helps them, I think, to learn how to look at themselves and ask really good questions about what it is that they want and what it is that they're becoming. Um, and I think that self-reflective, humble people are in a good position to serve others and to serve well in the church. The nature of the mentorship is, I mean, I see my students almost every day for 4 years. And that's, I think, the sort of interaction that gives students um, both encouragement and pause for reflection so that they can think about kind of what matters most to them and how they're going to interact with various sorts of things. Um, I think reading the curriculum for just about all my students is incredibly humbling because these books are really hard to read. They're jam-packed with insights, but they are hard-won insights. And so what students kind of have to do at Gutenberg is they really have to decide, like, am I doing this for real? It's not something you can be lukewarm about, kind of like skate through and, kind of do it halfway. You really have to be all in or all out. It's a little bit like uh, the Marines of schooling, as it were. And I think that kind of difficulty really brings into the fore a student's sense of personal commitment to what is good and what is worthy. And it's not something that the tutors can do for them. They have to do the good thing for themselves and to practice that. And it's really hard practice. So I think what you end up with a lot of times is a student who understands the seriousness with which they have to approach their life. And I think that translates very well into the family. And I think it translates very well into the church, especially at the level of collaboration. A marriage is all about collaboration. The church is all about collaboration. And what they've just done for 4 years is a really, really hard thing that they have to collaborate on. So they've had some really good practice in that area, which I think is beneficial.
So it's so easy to walk away from difficult relationships with electricity and cars and bikes and the internet, and there's so many ways to hide. Do you find that you have to, do you see kind of regularly that students hit almost like a crisis moment where you're like, okay, now they're really seeing what this is about, and we need to encourage them that it's worth pursuing because it is difficult? Or are the students so well selected from the beginning that they already have bought into this idea?
I think the crisis is not particularly rare, but I also don't think it's a bad thing. I think what you get is, I mean, as we all age, like we realize that the world is a lot bigger than we thought it was. So you could describe that as the crisis of waking up to, oh, I'm a lot smaller than I thought, and the world's a lot more big and complicated than I thought. And then I also think there's the context of students, I mean, dealing with all the pieces of all the nuances. I'll say nuances, all the nuances of how to think about questions, and how much more complex things actually are. I think that contributes somewhat to it as well. And I mean, when you get a lot of pieces thrown at you, and I mean, frankly, that's what happens in 4 years. Is it's just like book after book after book after book, lots of pieces. It takes time to organize them, and at first it can be overwhelming. Can be overwhelming for some, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Amanda, but I can remember the moment my sophomore year, and I was at a secular school with very little help in the realm of mentorship and discipleship. But I can remember the moment when my brain switched and went from, I didn't need to find the answer in the book. I needed to understand the question. And then the answer was easy. Do you have any stories like that, Amanda?
Not quite as crystal as you, but the good question is what allows you to communicate the idea. Because if you just communicate an idea, you don't know what question your audience has asked. And so part of what I'm hearing in Eliot's words are they're asking the questions from these great authors and letting the students wrestle with them. And the students are now starting to recapitulate, to say the answers. And as they say the answers, they will put the pronouns that work for them in the sense of, I believe this, or I don't believe this. And that belief factor is what I remember, Lee, mostly, is reading people's philosophy, even in the philosophy of communications, and realizing, no, that doesn't resonate with the way humanity's made. We are made to communicate, and we're made to understand. Our God has made us so that we can know him. And that is a treasure worth fighting for.
That's good words. So Eliot, we've asked you a number of questions. What do you want our listeners to know about Gutenberg that we didn't ask you?
Oh, let's see. Well, there are a number of, let's see, other things that we didn't get to. I mean, I think we got some pretty good depth going, Lee.
You're good at this, Amanda.
Conversation or two.
I would just, we want our students to love man and to love their God. I mean, that's really what this ministry is fundamentally categorically about. And we pray for that all the time. But for those, yeah.
Any other questions, Amanda, before we ask our closing question?
Just remind us where they can find out more about you.
Sure. You can go to our website, www.gutenberg.edu. You can learn about our education conference that's coming up in August, or preview days in April, or young philosophers, or classes for high schoolers that we offer on Zoom about various topics from a philosophical angle. And come for a visit. We'd love to meet you.
Yeah, that reminds me, I should give you a minute since I can't come. I really enjoyed speaking 2 years ago at Gutenberg, and something else has come up, so I can't this year. But tell us about the conference in August, because anybody can attend, right?
Absolutely. It's open to anyone. This conference is the Gutenberg College Education Conference. Faith and Learning is the topic of our conference. And basically, the topic is that we want people to think about what it means to be able to take truth and think about what it means and where it is coming from. So some people are sort of afraid to read certain kinds of books because it will change their mind in a wrong kind of way, and we want to encourage people that they can trust God to steward their minds for His purposes. So there's lots we can learn from all kinds of sources, and we hope that we can all think about that together.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your speakers. I think that they were probably the best collection of speakers in one room I'd been with. So I pray that it goes just as well this year. So our last question we ask everyone is, what is your advice for your 18-year-old self? Help the parents that are wrestling. What would you have said to yourself now that you know all you know?
Oh, humble yourself.
Mhm.
Humble yourself, seek humility, seek wisdom, listen to the ones who love you the most. Listen to the ones who have your best interests in mind, who have nothing to gain from you. Listen to those people, learn how to be humble and learn how to love and be loved. That's what I would say.
That's really good.
It is.
All right. Well, thank you for being on our show, Eliot.
Yeah.
This is Eliot Grasso. He's with Gutenberg College, and we encourage the families listening to go to their website and take a look and attend one of their open houses or their conferences, and that's in the late summer, and just learn more about just thinking with other people over 2,500 years of ideas.
Wow.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks,
Bye,
Elliot.
Eliot.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Lee. Pleasure being here with you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.